Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, and you're listening to episode 59 of Nerdacity podcast. And today my guest is Aria S. Halliday. She holds the Marie Rich Endowed Professorship and is Associate Professor in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies and African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Halliday is known for her research on the cultural constructions of Black girlhood and womanhood in material, visual, and digital culture in the 20th and 21st centuries. She engages broad interdisciplinary interests in Black feminism, art, and performance in Black popular culture in the United States and the Caribbean. Her research is featured in Cultural Studies, Departures in Critical Qualitative Research, Girlhood Studies, Palimpsest, and Souls. Her article, Twerk Sumn, Theorizing Black Girl Epistemology in the Body, won the 2021 Stuart Hall Foundation Times Cultural Studies Award. Visit her website at ariashalliday.com. I hope you'll follow Nerdacity on Instagram at Nerdacity Arts and also on X at NerdacityPod1. And definitely check out my website at DuEwaWorld.com. Thanks so much for listening. Greetings, Aria.
Hey,
How are you doing today?
I'm doing. We're here.
Yes. So thankful for you to join me here on Nerdacity podcast, and I'm really excited to discuss your new work.
Thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity just to chat.
Wonderful. And I want to congratulate you on this new book that you have that we're going to really discuss. And I'm feel like so privileged to have you here on the podcast to discuss it. And so we're talking about Black girls and how we fail them. And certainly a beautiful, riveting title. I know that it just is filled with gems and a great framework that we will be able to learn from you, Dr. Halliday, Aria, and be able to really understand how we need to look at this and moving forward, what we can do.
Yeah, I'm excited to just have people read it. I think it is really valuable. And I mean, thank you for saying so, but I think it is beautifully written. So
yes. And so
we'll benefit from it.
Totally. And I believe so as well. And Aria, if you don't mind, can you take us back and tell us about your background as a writer and scholar and how you came to be to this point in your work and scholarship?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of ways to start from that, but I'll say that, I went to Davidson College for undergrad, and that was the first time that I was exposed to, Black women's history. I didn't know there was a Black women's history experience. Like, I didn't know that was something you could study. And I remember Dr. Lakeisha Simmons, who's at Michigan, was a postdoc, and she taught this class, African American women's history. And that's the first time I read, Darlene Clark Hine or Bell Hooks or anybody like that. And I was like, these are my people. And once I got to grad school, I was dedicated to, I was already thinking about Black women's experience and thinking about memoir and autobiography. I wrote an honors thesis in undergrad about Audre Lorde and June Jordan and Constance Baker Motley and a few other people. And I just was already kind of interested in, like, what are the experiences of Black women in that particular situation, Black Caribbean women who come to the US, especially as children, and then I kept finding these kind of narratives of these women, Jamaica Kincaid and others, who said, there are these moments in childhood that really shifted their perspective, not only about themselves, right, and their race and gender, but also about how the world is going to interact and perceive them. And I feel like that was, this piece of idea that I had, and it just kind of grew. I can't even say that like I had like an epiphany moment. It just kind of sat there for a while. And then I started to read, work by Dr. Ruth Nicole Brown in her book, Black Girlhood Celebration. And I was thinking like, there's such a generative way that we can talk about Black girls, but I'm not seeing it in the literature that is, kind of quote unquote girlhood studies. So where are the Black women writing about Black girls? Where are the Black girls in the scholarship? And that's really what I've been doing for the past 10 years or so, thinking about, writing about, advocating for more scholarship about Black girls. And that's where this book comes from. And it really feels like, the book I always wanted to write or felt like I needed to write. And so I'm just excited that it's out in the world now.
That is amazing and so just wonderful because you've been on this path. And as you mentioned, you have continued in terms of Black girlhood studies. And I wanted to mention your previous work, Aria, the Black Girlhood Studies collection and edited volume. Can you talk to us about how that work laid the foundation for your latest book?
Absolutely. So that book, which I edited, I was really trying to find scholarship, like I said, about Black girls. Like I couldn't find it. I'm like, where are the Black women? Where are the Black girls in this literature? And so I put out a call for papers for people writing about Black girls that weren't like memories of Black girls, because there's actually a lot of that in literature, especially. And I wanted something that wasn't about, Black girls in education, because Ruth Nicole Brown and a lot of other folks in that field have really built up, very serious conversations and contributions about Black girls in educational spaces and how they harm them, or, affirm them in various ways. But I really wanted media representation. I wanted to know, how are we seeing, understanding, interpreting when we see Black girls on a screen? And so that work really, I mean, it's directly in line with this one, because I wanted to see, who else is talking about Black girls in media? What are they seeing? What are they saying? And one of the very first chapters is about, a Black girl media theory. How do we think about Black girls in the media? And I think that it helped, again, that piece of an idea kind of germinate into something else. And I was like, oh, I have a community of scholars now, right? Of people who are thinking about the experiences of Black girls and how we see them in the media. And, honestly, it still felt like there wasn't enough, right? Like, there's 10 chapters in that book and I'm like, we still need more. There's so much more to say. So that's where this book comes from.
That's wonderful. And then also, Aria, you have the book By Black, How Black Women Transform U.S. Pop Culture. And so can you tell us about that work? And even are there remnants of that previous work in your latest book?
Absolutely. So By Black is thinking about how Black women, were instrumental in creating a kind of legacy of Black media and Black representation in the 90s and 2000s, especially. But it goes all the way back to the early 1900s through, Black dolls, through Cinderella stories and narratives, and, all the way to hip hop and Nicki Minaj at the time. And so one thing that I noticed when writing that book is that, there were a lot of Black women talking about creating media for the Black girls, who were their daughters, or the Black girls that they, wanted to feel represented or connected to, the Black dolls that they created, or the Black Cinderella stories with Whitney Houston and Brandy Norwood, right? They wanted Black girls to feel themselves and, feel connected. And I said, okay, well, there's all these ways that these are actually representations of Black women who are playing Black girls, right? Brandy Norwood is not necessarily a girl when she's playing Cinderella, but we interpret her as a girl and understand her that way. But there are other representations, especially since the inauguration of Barack Obama, that have centered Black girls as characters. We have Black girls who are not only actors and actresses who are in these roles, but we're actually seeing, Black girls' lived experiences, so-called, being represented in these TV shows and films. And so they're connected in that way where, on one hand, we're thinking about how Black women are creating these things for Black girls. And this book is more about focusing on where we actually see Black girls show up, right? Not just who's creating them, but what do these images actually say and do?
That's wonderful. And I appreciate seeing, your journey, just thinking about your work and how it brought you to this book. And so now, Aria, I'd love for you to tell us about the background surrounding the inspiration for your latest book, in terms of, it sounds like it's just really very focused and honed in now on the aspects of Black girlhood that are showing how Black girls and women are viewed and treated in society, particular to media, as you mentioned, pop culture, and various other aspects that we can see threaded throughout our society. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so this book, honestly came from rage. I was so
Wow.
tired of,
Talk about it.
yeah,
Yes.
I was so tired of seeing these, films, celebrated films, right? They get all these awards and they're so beautiful and they get all these, critics deep loving and response for, but they're deeply harmful, right? I mean, Bell Hooks said this first, so this is not me, but, Beast of the Southern Wild, right? There's literally the entire film is about a Black girl being abused and finding her way out of it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so many people talk about the film Precious, and I'm like, the fact that a film like that could be created and then celebrated, right? Like Monique
Right.
got an award for it, but she's abusing a Black girl throughout the film. Um, and in 2020, during the pandemic lockdown, there's a film, Project Power, with Jamie Foxx as executive producer and the leading actor, that came out. And 2 minutes into the film, right, I'm just like, we're on our couches, we're just watching whatever we want to watch. 2 minutes into the film, right, the actress Dominique Fishback is playing a Black girl character, and she's getting beat up by two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I was like, what is happening? What am I seeing? Like, I was really trying to just enjoy a movie, right? They say, like, turn off your academic brain, just enjoy something. I really was. And
Right.
then I'm assaulted by this image, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
entire film is her being kidnapped, her being beat up, her being handcuffed, right? And at the end, it's like, she gets to go back to her life as if none of that ever happened. There's
As
no,
if nothing happened.
right, there's no apology, there's no really acknowledgement for why she's being disrespected in this way. It's just kind of, that's part of the plot, right?
Yeah. And
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, I was just saying, the book was really about, trying to write through that rage. Like, where does this come from? How did we get to a point where we don't even notice, right,
Mm-hmm.
that this is happening? And it's just part of the plot. It's just part of, and I remember when I first started talking to people about this idea, people kept coming up with more examples, right? Like, I think that's the part that's so salient about this, that, I only talk about maybe 12 examples in the book, but there are like hundreds more. Like, every time I talk about this book, someone says, oh, have you seen this show? Or have you heard this story? Or have
Mm-hmm.
you seen this thing? Which says, like, how ubiquitous it is, how broad, broad, widespread it is that Black girls are being treated like this. And we are observing it as something that's normal.
True indeed. And to your point, and I appreciate that, because that's making me think about either a discussion I had some months ago, or I think it was we had a podcast when Taraji P. Henson was discussing pay inequities in Hollywood
Mhm.
for Black women. I just remember she was doing, what project was that? I don't know if I should mention it. I guess it's okay. I think it's when she was doing Color Purple, and I didn't see that particular movie that they did, the recent one, but I just remember there being so much discussion and surprise, like, what, a woman like Taraji P. Henson isn't being paid? And this has
Mm-hmm.
been going on, like a woman at her level. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just think I started reading and hearing more discussion surrounding why does it even appear that even in quote unquote Hollywood, some of our most quote unquote brightest and talented gems, Black women and girls who are actresses, there seems to be some humiliation, right, that is attached to them in some of these roles. Like, why does it seem like a lot of the roles for Black women and girls are some type of, as you mentioned, abuse, and not only that, some type of humiliation,
Mm-hmm.
some type of, whether it's showing them in a relationship and it's like giving us that whole discussion of, just take the man who wants you, even if he's not, all that good for you. There's
Right.
so many movies and TV shows that are showing, oh, the Black woman just has to take whatever she can get. She
Mm-hmm.
cannot be wholly loved for who she is. She has to have quote unquote struggle love. That's all that's there for the Black woman. And I feel like there's so many films that depict that, the whole struggle love theme, the whole, I can do bad by myself, that whole attitude. It's like, we're tired of this. We Can you please show us with joy? Why is it always struggle and strife? Even today, like recent, you know what I mean? I think, I don't want to mention the filmmaker's name, but there are continual movies with certain filmmakers where it does seem like it's a constant theme of struggle. It's a
Yeah.
constant theme of nobody wants her. This
Mm-hmm.
man might want her. Oh, but she has too many kids. Or it's always something crazy like, why does the Black woman have to go through this on the big screen, sir?
Right. That's right. No, that's exactly right. And I think, that continued example over and over and over again, right? No, not only does it communicate that like this is something that's normal on screen, this is supposed to communicate that it's normal in everyday life, right? That
Mm-hmm.
this is something that we are expected to participate in, to approve of, to think is completely normal and regular and common, and I talk about this in the book that, there's this idea that, oh, it's just common sense. That's just the way it is. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no point in like questioning it or thinking anything about it. But that's exactly why it's problematic, that it's become so widespread that we're not even supposed to think or question it.
It's normal and it's become entertainment.
Yes,
this
that's
is
right.
this is entertainment for us, and therefore, and because some of the entertainment is being, dare I say, created actually by Black folks or people who
Mm-hmm.
look like us, we then cannot critique it.
That's right. I
We're
mean, I
not supposed
yeah.
to critique it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I get to that at one part of the book in the Mean Black Girl chapter, where I'm talking about the fact that these are works created by Black women, right? Cuties was created by Black women, by a Black woman. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but, the whole idea that like it's so perfectly okay for this Black girl to be treated this way, and there's not, and the question was really about how she was interacting with her friends, not the way that her parents were interacting with her that made her create this kind of relationship with her friends. There was kind of no comment about her
Hmm.
parents. And even in the ways that people took up the film afterwards, it was like, oh, pornography of children, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, but are we talking about the way that she was treated by her parents?
Right. Because we don't do that. And we're also not supposed to even critique our own families. It
Right.
just seems, and I appreciate you saying that, because I've only started seeing recently more discussion online and in social media about dysfunction in families, abuse
Yeah.
in families, dare I, dare I say SA and molestation and incest and all these different things that you were supposed to be quiet and hush hush about because
Mm-hmm.
you don't speak up about your Black family member. These are the people who took care of you, who you see at Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner. But now I see more Black women and even some men and who are speaking up saying, you know what, I don't choose to be a part of those things. I don't wish to be a part of those toxic relationships anymore. I'm getting therapy for myself, or I'm realizing that just because I've been born into this family doesn't mean I have to continue participating in this abuse.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's where this book is hopefully, stepping in to give people some ammunition, some confidence to say, this is not how I want to live my life. And this is not the kind of life I want to create for the people that I love either.
Thank you for that. And Aria, in your book, you discuss, we know that media, Black media, social media, and even our radio media has been a part of our culture where it comes to discussing the entertainment news of the day, current interviews of the best and brightest popular stars, our Black female celebrities, those who are rappers or singers or actresses, and even, some of the blogs and popular blogs, websites that we may follow on social media. Can you discuss how they have, from the chapter in your book, how these media entities or platforms are also responsible in putting out certain messages and portraying Black women and girls in a certain manner?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you think about how we consume media, especially through social media right now, right? Usually there's someone who posts, a clip of a preacher saying something on, a Sunday morning, or it is an interview from a podcast that gets looped, or it's a piece of a film that someone is questioning or talking about. And then it becomes this kind of social media conversation where people are like, okay, I have a problem with this, or I think this is great, or vice versa. And I think that, the media consumption, particularly around Black girls and women, is that, it's sensationalized. It's always kind of entertainment, regardless of how problematic or strange or abusive the situation might be. And, I talk about some popular shows and talk groups, with Red Table Talk or the Breakfast Club. And I talk about the fact that, like, they create this kind of idea that we should want to consume the abuse and maiming of Black girls and women. Because they are constantly bringing on people to maybe talk about, their new show, or to talk about their, political ideas or whatever it is, but they always pick up on, the most sensationalized and quote unquote entertaining part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And so we don't actually get to even talk, especially when there's Black girls or women on the Breakfast Club. We don't get to actually talk about whatever they came to talk about. We're talking about whatever drama that's been associated with their name. This has happened to Keke Palmer. It's happened to Monique. It's happened to a lot of different people. And I mean, that doesn't even, name the ways that they disrespect and abuse the trans and queer people who show up on the show as well. But Black women in particular, I mean, there's a way that they always find, this kind of kernel of ridiculousness to talk about.
True.
And from the background I've heard that people have even told them, I don't want to talk about this thing that happened, or I don't want to talk about this thing that happened, a year or two ago. Let's not discuss it. And they still bring it up on the show. Mm-hmm. And, it's, I think, a perfect example of just like, we're not seeing Black women and girls as people. We're seeing them as entertainment objects. Right, we're interested in how they can entertain us, especially with their harm, and especially with the ways that they've been abused.
And I appreciate you saying that, because we're seeing this threaded in a lot of the sensational cases that come out, that go viral on social media, the different discussions and debates, and you see, what side people are on with certain news and certain things. And it almost seems like if it's a person of note, particularly, perhaps a man or even a woman, if it's a person of note in our community or established on a certain media platform, it's okay for them to be abusive. It's okay for them to make fun of Black girls and women in some way, to make light of a painful situation or create a caricature of us. And it's like, wow, and on the meanwhile, on the other side, you have a discussion that's saying Black women are constantly saving everyone. In politics, it was Black women that did X, Y, Z. And it's so interesting. It's like, so which one are we? Are we the savior, or are we just the trash to throw away? Or are we both?
Well, my book will say that we're both, right? I have a chapter about how we're saviors, and I have a chapter about how we're dispensable, right? And ultimately, our dispensability is based on our usefulness for other people. Are we allowing them to grow and become, the best fathers? Are we allowing them to go and be successful in whatever area that they want to be? That's what Black women and girls are for. And if we're not doing that, then, what use do we have?
And can I ask you, Aria, does that also mean if we are not suffering or suffering for others' entertainment, what use do we have? Does that have a part in that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Ultimately our position as saviors, right? We can step in to protect people, but it's usually at our own expense, right? We have talked about and seen in the media people talking about, Black women coming into these Fortune 500 companies as CEOs, and they're there to repair it. And as soon as things go even more to the left, or they rebound, they get rid of them, right? Or they throw them under the bus as soon as there's any sign of opposition. I mean, this happened with, university presidents. This has happened with Black women politicians. This has happened with Black women who worked at Fortune 500 companies, right? We're seeing this happen over and over and over again, that Black women are, the cleanup women, but they have no purpose otherwise.
So in other words, once you've solved our problem, we then have no use for you.
Exactly.
Because we can't.
Maybe we'll entertain ourselves with how we get rid of you. We'll entertain ourselves with the harm that we do and getting rid of you now that we don't need you for our own purposes.
That's absolutely crazy. That's diabolical.
Yep.
And so can we get into, Aria, and I appreciate that so much. You're really enlightening us. Can we get into the idea of the hypervigilance on Black girls, particularly as they grow? Thinking about Sasha and Malia Obama, and even when they were in the White House, it was as if they could not just be girls. Everything from their bodies to what they were wearing, to a facial expression, to how they were standing. Every little thing was picked apart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because, a couple years ago, there was kind of an understanding that we didn't talk about children in the White House, right? Like once they're in the White House, they're kind of protected. The media doesn't go after them. There's not this kind of discussion. That completely changed with the election of Barack Obama for obvious reasons. But now even that, Barack Obama's presidency was 2 presidents ago, people are still expecting, right, behavior, saviorism, entertainment from Michelle, especially.
Yep.
And their daughters, right? Their daughters cannot do anything. Like literally,
they really can't.
They can't post a video. They can't talk to anyone.
They can't be seen in public either by themselves or with others.
I write about in the book and in my research that, like, even going to college, right, their classmates are being interviewed about how they interacted in class. Right? The level of surveillance is astonishing. You think like, oh, and ultimately they were not elected. They're private citizens.
True.
They're little girls who just happen to be living in a big house. And then they went off to college, and everything they've done since is fodder for entertainment, is fodder for ridicule. Oh, her hair looks like this, or she's standing like this. Is she angry because she did this way? Or, she's like Michelle, so she got to be mad, right? There's this way that they're constantly under surveillance for how closely they participate in whatever people want to attribute to their parents.
And I'd love to know, exactly what criteria, in other words, not criteria, but exactly what are they scrutinizing them for? Because by now, aren't both of these young women are, well, young women. They're no
Right.
longer little girls anymore. So exactly what are you assessing them on? Because they don't have to wear the patent leather shoes with the cute little dress anymore and stand quietly next to their parents and their, you know, they don't have to play that role. They're no longer, as you mentioned, in the White House. So what do people want from them?
People want to control them, right? That surveillance and that hyper surveillance is just about being able to control people. And when Black women and girls do not participate or act in the ways that people think we should, right, we need to be controlled. It goes back to slavery. It goes back to how white supremacy operates. It goes back to, as Moya Bailey calls it, misogynoir. And the fact that, like, you know, there is a hatred for how Black women and girls operate in the world. And the best way to operate on that hatred is through surveillance and control.
Mm. And do you believe, I also wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the Black, not the Breakfast Club, and we know that the folks on that platform are of color. Do you find, in terms of this surveillance and hypervigilance, is it just non-Black people doing this, or do you find that people in our community do the same thing to Black
That's a good
girls?
question. Yeah, I tell my students this all the time. I said, you know, we would like to think that these are people who are not like us, right? In the words of Kendrick Lamar, who participate in these kinds of activities, but ultimately it's us too, right? And that's why the book is called How We Fail Them, not How They Failed Them.
Hey.
We participate
Mm.
in these activities either by, you know, direct complicitly, you know, complicitly talking about you know, the Obama girls, or, you know, we circulate it, we send it to our friends, we're in group chats talking about it, right? We are furthering this idea that it's perfectly okay, right, to surveil, to disrespect, to abuse Black women. And, you know, I think, for example, with the Diddy case that's come up, right? It was sensationalized. We can talk about it every day, all day, but we're not talking about the harm that's being discussed. It is
Yeah.
just entertainment.
Right. No one, I don't think people don't really want to get into that. And then when you do, because I see the comments and I've stopped, you know, I wanted to discuss it some time ago and I stopped posting about it. I was like, well, what else?
Yeah.
Because one thing I noticed when it comes to women or women of color, it's like people want to turn, they want to turn away. They don't want to, in other words, women of Black and I say women of color because I don't know how all the women that are related to this case identify. And I don't want to identify them for them, but I do know there are women of color involved in addition to allegedly Black women over the years that people came out with certain, you know, stories and memories related to this case, things that have happened regarding him that may not have been, you know, in this case, but you know how the different stories started coming out. Well, back during this time and in the 90s, this is what happened. And then, you know, Howard University came up and those kind of things. It's
Mm-hmm.
as if people want to blame the victim or blame, well, what was she doing? Blah, blah, blah. Well, what did she do to cause it? Oh, well, she was accepting money. Oh, well, did she accept gifts? Well, that doesn't make it okay.
Right. Right.
And in a
Some
lot of cases,
$1 million, that doesn't mean they're allowed to disrespect or abuse you.
right. So if you took, so in other words, right, it's like, okay, is that the price to beat up somebody or do other things? That's, you know, so you got XYZ, so that means you were fair game for the abuse. I'm
Right.
like, that doesn't make any, or do you all hear yourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And then you wonder, well, these are adults saying this and these are adults debating. And my thing is, some of these adults have children. And I'm like, so would you teach your daughters this? That that's okay? Let's say they have a boyfriend or a partner per se. Is it okay for them to be abused because someone has done things for them? Or because they agreed to one aspect of a relationship, if you agree to part of it, that means you agree to all of it, even if it is the abuse. And it's like, okay, well, oh, you knew what you were getting into. Sometimes people don't know. I see that all the time. Oh, they knew what they were getting into. Maybe they didn't.
Well, the thing is, even if they did, that still doesn't make it okay, right? Like
Right.
they were getting into, okay, so this person has a history of doing these things.
Right.
Have we atoned for or
Right.
with that history?
Well, then,
Probably not.
well, then why haven't y'all addressed it? People saying, oh, well, we all been knew about XYZ since the 90s, since the 2000s. Okay, well, why wasn't it ever addressed then?
Right. Exactly.
So it's very interesting. And it's like, okay, so there's something I just lost my, okay. With misogynoir, can you talk more about the what misogynoir looks like? In other words, is this just pop culture media driven? Is this also in everyday life in terms of work, the workplace, or in education? Or how can we learn or know more about that?
Sure. So Dr. Moya Bailey at Northwestern University coined the term misogynoir. And there was a blogger, Trudes, who also, worked with her in this discussion. And mostly because Moya Bailey talks about, when the Nelly's video for Tip Drill came out,
Mm-hmm.
and, having this credit card slide behind of a Black woman.
Yep.
Right, she was at Spelman and they were protesting Nelly coming to campus, because
I remember that.
Yeah, he was coming to give scholarships. And they were like, well, we don't want no scholarships from you if you don't atone for this disrespect in your music video. And there was a really large discussion about it. And from there, Dr. Bailey found that these kinds of ideas also spread in healthcare, in the medical industry, which we've seen a lot more of that with conversations about Black maternal health in the last couple of years. But I think when she termed the word misogynoir, it was really to apply to anywhere that we see Black women and Black girls being disrespected and mistreated, and that hatred to the specific hatred of Black women and girls can be in the everyday, right? You might experience it as like Dr. Caretha Mitchell calls it know your place aggression as a Black woman in the workplace. People telling you that you need to smile, people telling you that you need to operate in these kinds of ways at work. But you might also experience it in your relationships, right? People expect you to do certain things or act certain ways because, you're the woman, or because, this is what Black women get, right? There are a number of celebrities and others in interracial relationships, and they say, oh, I don't date Black women because they're XYZ, right? There's a way that kind of narrative is built on misogynoir, this kind of hatred towards Black women and girls simply for being a Black woman or simply for being a Black girl.
That's right. And when you talk about, thank you for that, Aria, and when you talk about Black women's labor, in Black women's labor, what is it that we are we in fact, as you mentioned, Black Girls Code and the work of the founder of Black Girls Code and what that has been for Black girls, and also Black Girls Rock. DJ Beverly Bond founded that. Are we doing this? Is this to help our community? Is this to save our community? Is this because no one else will do it? Can you discuss that aspect, and how does that play a part in the way others view us or treat us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that, that actually is a way that both of my books, By Black and Black Girls and How We Fail Them, are connected, right? That Black women are actively trying to create spaces and communities and media that speaks to the experiences of Black girls, right? So the founder of Black Girls Code was a Black mom who wanted her daughter, right, to have a good experience with learning to code. This is after she had gone to a STEM camp and was mistreated, right?
Mm.
And so she started this program because she wanted her daughter to feel affirmed, and she knew, if my daughter is experiencing this in California, right, I can't imagine where Black girls are not experiencing this wherever they are. So, but the thing that's really interesting about even the phrasing Black Girls Code is that there's this kind of expectation that Black girls have to do labor, right, to be respected or loved or treated well, right? That, we can't think of, why isn't it called, Girls Code for Fun or whatever, right? Why is it,
Mm.
right? It's kind of like the rhetorical structure of the name requires Black girls to do something to be
Yes.
celebrated. And Black Girls Rock is the same way. Black girls rock
Mm-hmm.
because they do these various things in society. And I think, even as we as Black women care so deeply about the self-esteem and the treatment of Black girls, we also fall, prey to these ideas where we think, okay, well, yeah, if if someone's not treating you well there, kill them with kindness, right? That is a laborious work that we're telling a Black girl to do. Or
Yes.
ignore them, just be yourself and be nice, right? There's the labor that's a part of that, that we don't actually allow Black girls to participate in, even being angry or being mad, or telling somebody, I don't want you to treat me this way. There's a way that we have kind of shouldered the burden, Black women, over time, and we impart this information to Black girls that they should operate kind of as the saviors, as the rebuttal to the way that everybody else gets to exist in the world, right? We always have to save people. We have to treat them well. We have to show up, pretty and prim in our pearls or whatever it is, so that everyone else feels comfortable with how we interact in the world.
Sure. And that makes a lot of sense. And Aria, can you also discuss, it's interesting, your chapter that really addresses Black fatherhood from the lens, the unfortunate, sometimes unfortunate lens of, the hip hop father who on one hand has been known and outed for being abusive, whether in his career work relationships with artists or with his female partners and marriages or relationships. And in another sense, the images of these men being quote unquote great fathers and model fathers, and oh well, he takes care of his kids, like that is a replacement, or that is what is the true mark of his character. Not that he may beat his partners, or not that he may do other heinous acts to the people that work for him or things like that. Can you discuss what you have termed hymen hysteria, Black men's fake fatherly concerns?
Yes. So,
Yes.
that particular section, of course, was about the rapper T.I. and how, there was a lot of discussion about how he, took his daughter to the gynecologist, and he would sit in the room and question whether or not her hymen was intact.
Mm-hmm.
And he used this as, the kind of marker of his fatherhood. I care about whether or not my daughter is sexually active or not.
Right.
But he of course is misinformed that a hymen being intact has anything to do with sexual activity. It's not related whatsoever. But then also that it's kind of being interested in your daughter's sexual activity is somehow a marker of care and concern. Like, have you talked to her about what having a sexual relationship that is good and loving and affirming is? Or have you only talked to her about whether or not her hymen is intact? And I think that, it's a great example of the kind of short-sightedness that we have when we're thinking about how, men show up as fathers, right? There's this discussion like, oh, he's babysitting. No, those are his kids. He's watching his own.
Those are his children. He's not babysitting, like he's doing what a father should do.
That's his kid. And so I think that, our society has allowed people to get away with, celebrating men for just showing up, right? For just being there. That's enough. For just, giving your last name. That is a perfect example of the way that, you father. Um, but also, in my conversations in preparation for this book, I interviewed, 10 of my male friends who had become fathers recently. And I asked them, where do you learn information about fatherhood? Where did you get an example of what kind of father you wanted to be? And these are that I would say are actually really great fathers, people that I have, celebrated the way that they show up for their kids. And they said, oh, hip hop taught me. And I'm like,
really?
What did hip hop teach you? Because
That's interesting.
Exactly. So I was really interested in learning, like, how did you learn what you did and show up for your kids in these really loving and protective and joyous ways if the example that we're getting in hip hop is this hymen conversation, or it's how do people disrespect their kids, right? Or mistreat them. And I'm like, okay, there has to be a disconnect somewhere, and it's in the discourse, which is really what my book is trying to talk about.
True. And I appreciate that. And also the double standard. One of these fathers, I won't mention him on this podcast, but you may know one of these fathers, they were saying a few years back, fired the nanny for his kids because the nanny became pregnant and was unmarried. And they said, he actually said, you're a bad example for my kids. And people were like, the irony, the not irony, but the hypocriticalness that this is a man that has children with women and he didn't marry them. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's so crazy. Like, you're policing a woman. This is a woman who's pregnant for working with your daughters, but you've done the same thing. So you think the image or the model you've set for your kids is not harmful, but a woman being it's just really crazy. Like, that doesn't make sense.
No, and usually it doesn't, and that, I think, is where exactly find how misogynoir operates, right?
Yes.
It doesn't actually make sense when you think about all of these things connected.
Right. And, also, and thank you for that, Aria. When you talk about, okay, we did talk about the Obama girls. Would you also say that in terms of, there's been increased discussion over the years, how it's treated when Black girls or Black women are reportedly missing versus other girls and women in our society? Do you also feel that that is similarly showing in one way, there's the hypervigilance and surveillance, but then in another, on the other hand, there's the idea of, okay, do you put the same focus and importance on when Black girls or women are missing or have been harmed or in some type of danger or emergency that you do with all women?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I start the book with this discussion of Black girls going missing, and not just like missing physically, right, being, kidnapped or disappeared, but also missing because they have dug so deeply out of themselves, right, devoid themselves of their truth that, their inner self has gone missing. They don't even know who they are. And I think those two things are connected, right? The fact that we don't protect Black girls when they go missing. There are very few stories that reach national attention about people who are missing, who are Black girls. But then also, that means that when we do see a Black girl, we're constantly judging her hair, her body, how she talks, what her nails look like, what her hair looks like, right? There's this way that they actually go hand in hand. When I see you, I want to study every single thing about you. And when I don't, you don't exist.
Right. It's spot on. And would you also say that in terms of, do you find that television has changed? We've talked about films. Is television similar to that, or do you think television is somehow different? Because it used to be that, we could watch, some people felt, oh, well, Girlfriends doesn't necessarily show negative aspects, or a living single, or a different world. do you feel that the era of a positive television image of Black girls and women is gone? Or, there used to be Moesha and shows like that. What do you think about that in terms of Black girlhood in television and how the Black girl or woman's image is treated in that medium?
I think, if we look closely at things like Moesha, or we look closely at Girlfriends or Living Single, there's some deeply problematic ideas in there too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that we actually are seeing kind of a broadening of the ways that Black girls and women can show up, right? You have a show like Euphoria that has a Black girl character as a center, although she's seemingly mixed race. I don't know how they talk about race in that show that much. Mm-hmm. Or anything that Issa Rae has produced or created in the past couple of years, Lena Waithe, there are others.
Right.
I think that we're seeing a lot more examples of how Black women and girls exist in the world, but we don't necessarily get quote unquote positive images. I don't think that positive images exist, honestly. I mean, I think that we can talk about, ideas that are more relatable to Black girls, or they, represent Black girls closer to their actual experiences. But I don't know that we can say something is positive or negative, because ultimately there are deeply problematic things in most things that we enjoy, right? That is what popular media is fed on, right? That same thing, like
Sure.
The Breakfast Club to television, right? I mean, the entertainment part of it is the sensationalism in many ways. I mean, I remember there's a pregnancy and an abortion episode on A Different World. That's not necessarily that different than, Molly and her conversations about relationships and sex and Insecure, right? I mean, they're related and connected in very interesting ways, but I think that we're seeing more opportunity for Black girls to show up on screen. But they're not necessarily better or worse or positive or negative. I think we're getting more examples, but they're kind of following in the same tropes.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of Aria, the idea of Black girls, as you address Queen Sugar, a wildly popular show. I used to love that show on OWN. Queen Sugar and the Southern representation of Black girls and women, quote, loving fast-tailed girls, Queen Sugar, Southern Black girlhood, and theological abuse. Can you discuss somewhat of that perspective there?
Yes. I mean, I think I loved Queen Sugar. I watched the first couple of seasons and was really drawn to the show and how beautifully it was done. But I think, so my critique of that was not necessarily about the show, but it was about the way that people talked about the show, right? So we started to see kind of social media conversations about the character Kiki as a dark-skinned Black girl, and that she's so fast, and she's operating in these ways that are, treating Micah like he's supposed to be sexual, like she's the aggressor. And I was like, he's the one at her school.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, as a Black Southern girl, I mean, somebody showing up at your after school practice or before school practice, I mean, that's an aggressor.
That's a predator. Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm like, how are we talking about the Black girl as the fast one when she is just doing what her regular schedule is? He's showing up at her door.
It's always the Black girl's fault. Even that whole conversation, it's cultural. If a Black girl gets pregnant, right, or with she's had a boyfriend or whatever, they always say the family blames it on the girl. That fast-tailed girl trapped my son. She trapped my son with a baby. And it's like, okay, so your son wasn't involved with that at all, ma'am?
Exactly. And so, part of my concern is how regularly we use misogynoir to excuse these really problematic ideas, right? We say, oh, well, that's just the way that it is. Women and girls are conniving or whatever. And we give biblical credence to that. Part of that chapter is thinking about how Christianity, justifies the way that we talk about Black girls in this way.
Exactly. And then before we get to a beautiful excerpt, I wanted to also ask you about Black girls being the savior, even Black women. You've heard a lot of talk recently, politically, in this last year or so, about Black women. Black women need to rest now. Black women need to, sit down because of all the labor and the work and uh, the savior role that Black women have been in recent years. And what are your thoughts about that? Is this going to, with everything that has occurred, do you find that this image and this trope for Black girls and women will change, will fade away, or is it something that is very much still real in our society and reality?
I think that it's still very real, and I don't know that it's going to disappear. I think Black women are taking a different approach to how we show up, right? This whole, like, Black girl, go lay down, we not working. But I'm not sure that Black women can be divorced from these ideas. They come from white supremacy, they come from slavery, right? This idea that Black women should always be working and helping, and they are infused in every aspect of our culture. I don't know that they're going to disappear. But I think that Black women are trying to learn differently, right? We're trying to do different things. Thanks to things like therapy, thanks to podcasts and, book clubs and groups. I think people are really trying to learn to do different things, but the way that pop culture works is that it distills, these new and revolutionary and different ideas into something that's palatable for everybody else. And I think that we have to be careful about making sure that we're attentive to, what our own healing processes are, which is kind of where I end the book. But also, being real about the ways that we need to be vulnerable with each other, right, to get through that healing process.
Thank you so much. That's so beautifully stated. And for sure, that's definitely where we want to be headed. And so, Aria, will you please grace us by reading a brief excerpt of your new book?
I will. I think earlier we had discussed me reading maybe a poem, but I think I'm going to read the last paragraph of the book because that's just where I'm being led right now.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yes. So on page 160, the very last paragraph, it says, "In the pursuit of survival, we have failed by sacrificing ourselves and our girls to the violence of white supremacy and patriarchy. We've let protection in the form of value constructed by men keep us apart and create narratives about who is worthy of protection and who is not. We have been complicit based on faulty logic and false generosity, but we don't have to be. Through therapy, truth, and sisterly community, we can navigate and change the world we experience for our daughters and sons, but most importantly, for ourselves."
Wow, that is so beautiful. Aria, this has been amazing to talk with you about your wonderful new book. And please tell us, what are you most looking forward to next in regard to your book, your work, any speaking engagements, or things that may be on the horizon for you?
That's such a lovely question. I'm doing a lot of work to just get the word out about this book, thanks to you and several other people who've reached out to talk about this book. Because I do think it'll be really helpful for people who read it and engage with it. It's less than 200 pages. It's not that hard, right? But I think it is really valuable to the way that we think about how we operate in the world, how we show up for ourselves, how we, learn to be in community with other people, even as we're vulnerable and struggling in our own ways. And so I am doing a couple podcasts here and there. I do have a couple of speaking engagements, which I'm not going to name because, people, you just got to find me where I am. But the easiest way is to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Aria Halliday. It's the best way to find out what I'm doing and where I'm going to be.
That's amazing. That's great. And then also, can we have your, Aria, can we have your socials, where to follow you on socials, and then also where to best pick up our own copy of your new book, Black Girls and How We Feel Them?
Yes. So, the social media that I most actively check, if you're trying to find me, it's the best ways to find me is on Instagram at Dr. Aria Halliday. I'm also still on Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky at Dr. Aria Halliday. If you use any of those, you can find me there. And I'll say that you can buy this book literally anywhere books are sold. Anywhere. But I would encourage you to support some independent Black-owned bookstores. Kindred Stories in Houston is a great place. There's Red Emma's in Baltimore. There's a number of places that you could choose from. You can go to bookshop.org and it will help you find an independent bookstore near you.
That's wonderful. Well, Aria, I certainly appreciate once again you sharing your knowledge, wisdom, and genius with us on Nerdacity podcast. Definitely everyone should pick up Black Girls and How We Fail Them, your latest book. And I do hope that we will continue to keep in touch. And of course, you will have my support in promoting your work, and definitely let me know what else new is up with you in the coming months and year.
It sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.